Hey guys, it's Nina and today we're doing this. So this is part 2 of my Sweet Fishes video, so if you haven't seen part 1, go ahead and check that out. And if you have, welcome back. We're gonna get right back into where we left off with the relationships. Anyway, that's it for the most prevalent characters. Let's move on to the relationships.
You feel sleepy, a blurred vision, headache? I'm just saying things I've heard on Grey's Anatomy. Not that I watch Grey's Anatomy, because I definitely do not.
Tyler and Jules first meet at a party thrown at the sorority house. They meet again at a bar after Ophelia killed his stepbrother. They start flirting and Ophelia pushes him to ask for her number. And as you know, they start cutesy texting while burying his brother. They bond over both having a dead parent. In episode 3, Jules and Ophelia watch this diary-like video of a girl explaining her essay experience, and Jules is affected by it. As she leaves, Tyler comes up behind her and she turns around and throat punches him. Somehow they start walking together and then Tyler goes off to talk to a police officer about his brother, and Jules dips. Later on in the episode, they're hanging out in Jules' bedroom and they discover that Jules is sensitive to touch based on her trauma. She freaks out a little bit and asks him to leave. He's very confused about her intentions because so far she's been very confusing about what she wants. At the end of the episode, they finally have a somewhat deeper talk. Jules is so smooth and clear about her intentions and it's very refreshing.
Those actions might send the message that I don't like you and that I don't want to see you. And I do. I want to see you a lot.
Most of the time in these teen shows, the wishy-washy behavior goes on through many seasons. They kiss after clear consent and it's a beautiful moment. In episode 4, he shows up again with a gift. He gets her a new backpack because he notices that her old one has a rip in it. It has a tear in it because she ripped it at Carter's garage, but we don't talk about that. He's so sweet and observant. She tells him that they can meet up again after the George Washington statue on campus is painted pink. This is the prank that the sorority sisters were supposed to pull for prank week. Unfortunately, the sisters decide to go prank the frat house instead of painting the statue, and so the statue never becomes pink. Tyler shows up again, but this time with the small George Washington statue that is pink because he couldn't wait for the statue on campus to be painted. Jules then tries to comfort him about Carter, which is kind of hard to watch because of her double motives. In episode 5, they're looking up at the stars and they're talking about Orion, who accidentally killed his lover's sister. Jules shares how she used to look up at the stars with her mom when she was younger. She died 12 years ago that week. He talks about his parents not supporting his major. This is when Jules decides to plan a pop-up art show because he hasn't showcased his work before and she thinks that he deserves to be recognized. But he gets upset because people don't understand his work. He makes up with her later in that episode by surprising her with projected stars in her bedroom, which is very thoughtful considering what she said about her mom. In episode 6, Ophelia runs through the record store as the vigilante to get Harris off of Jules' trail. Jules and Tyler stay up in Ophelia's apartment and they start to make out and get it on. He asks for consent again, which we love to see. But then Jules sees Tyler morph into Nate and she pushes him over. This is when Jules tries to cut it off with Tyler because she can't tell him about Nate and he accuses her of wanting to be with Nate. He tries to be there for her and listen, but she refuses. It's so sad because Tyler is so great for her. In episode 8, Tyler comes to the sorority house looking for Jules to tell her about the sus stuff that he's found out about his brother, but instead he finds out that Jules was kicked out of the sorority house. He wanted to go to her for support. Instead, he ends up at the record store where he finds Harris, and the two of them decide to go to the party that Jules and Ophelia are at to essentially get Jules back. But at the party, he sees Jules flirting with Brady, which is part of the vigilante takedown. Tyler sees Jules flirting with Brady and then gets upset. Later on at the party, Jules sees Tyler flirting with someone else and she gets upset. And then of course he tells her he just saw her doing the same thing. In episode 9, Tyler and Jules meet up at a booth at a restaurant to try to make up, but unfortunately, Tyler jumps the gun to try to talk to her about his brother. He tells her that the police are going to search his apartment and garage, and because of this, she messages Ophelia to give her a call so that they can go and deal with that. She never really explains anything to him. Eventually, Tyler finds out what happened between Jules and Nate because she files a report against him and the word gets around. He offers to give her support at the trial, but then when Nate shows up, he punches him in the face. For some reason, Jules gets mad at this, like she hasn't been beating up guys this whole time for the very same reason. Anyway, later on, he apologizes for losing his cool and explains that it's because of all of his heightened emotions surrounding what's happening with his brother. They make out, and I'm like, that's really not cool on Jules's part, but okay. Like, you killed his brother, and now you're gonna boink. So wrong. And at the end of this episode, Tyler gets arrested for the murder of his brother. Peter and I were both like, what? Why? Turns out, apparently, he and his brother had a fight a few weeks earlier, and that's why Tyler's blood was in the garage, and so they were like, oh, you killed him. But that's also how he found out that his brother was murdered in the first place. Also, they found Tyler's blood in the garage, but they didn't find Ophelia's puke anywhere. And at the end of episode 10, after Ophelia and Jules frame someone else to get him out of jail, they exchange I love yous.
I love you.
I love you too.
Aw, so cute. It's so hard not to root for them, even though there is literally no possible way that they're going to work out. What, she's going to keep the fact that she murdered his brother a secret forever? Good luck with that. Let's talk about Ophelia and Jules.
Yay, okay, I actually think you're gonna be pretty impressed with my skills. You know, watch a lot of kung fu movies, kind of all up in here, Matrix style.
Yeah, that's what I thought.
As you know, they became friends in the very unlikely scenario that they committed a murder together.
Guy I like is related to the guy that we murdered. I feel like I'm gonna be sick.
Of course, under normal circumstances, would these two have become friends? Probably not. But as Ophelia points out, their different forms of darkness within is what kind of brings them together. I would also argue the fact that Ophelia is so supportive of Jules and sees her is a big factor in why they became friends. Even though in the end, Ophelia is really not supportive of how Jules is using her anger as a healing process. They have a falling out after Ophelia suggests that they continue the vigilante stuff after burying Carter's body. At the very end of the episode, this is when Ophelia discovers the wall in the girls' bathroom. Ophelia brings Jules there and they decide that they have to keep doing this. It's a very powerful moment, and this is when we find out officially that Nate is the person that R-worded Jules as she writes his name on the wall. At the beginning of episode 3, Jules trains Ophelia in hand-to-hand combat in a montage, and we find out that Ophelia is already good at throwing knives. This episode is when they send Tyler a text from Carter's phone to keep him off the trail. Episode 4 is really interesting because they tackle the topic of female-on-female SA. I loved how they filmed the juxtaposition between the two sororities by going back and forth and connecting sentences.
Kappa's not a pussy sorority, like those over at the sisterhood of Zeta Zeta Psi.
It was very entertaining. After they find out that this sorority is not only hazing, but posting hazing stuff online to make money, they decide to take them down. When they finally go up against the women of the sorority, they're equally powerfully matched. It's an interesting juxtaposition because whenever they went up against a man, they were always the one on top. The man was very weak. This also showcases the fact that women are maybe more likely to learn self-defense. The kick in the nads bit is also an ode to the comparison. At the end of episode 4, Kennedy and Jules have this talk where Kennedy says, I'll respect what you're going through and, not try to push you. And she offers her a slice of grilled cheese with tomato. And Jules puts it on the side of the couch and doesn't eat it. She also decides to still not confide in her. Instead, she meets up with Ophelia at the pizza place where she does confide in Ophelia and also actually eats the pizza that they are sharing together. It's a little bit of symbolism showing that she's very comfortable with Ophelia and that she's gonna be able to talk to Ophelia and eat food around her. Whereas in the Kennedy situation, she still doesn't want to talk to Kennedy and she doesn't want to eat the food offered from her. I really like the symbolism of that. At the end of episode 6, after she confronts Nate, she also decides to go talk to Kennedy. Unfortunately, Nate had already gone to talk to Kennedy and told her that it was a cheating scenario. When Kennedy doesn't believe her,
You lie about what you're doing, so why should I believe you now? Please, Kennedy, you have to believe me.
she goes to Ophelia's apartment to, find comfort. In episode 7, Ophelia actually pushes Jules to talk about her emotions and not bottle things up and use anger as a way to cope. But it turns out that Jules has actually been lying about going to group, and instead she's been doing solo recon. Jules and Ophelia hash it out after Jules nearly kills Brady. Ophelia is saying that she should actually talk to someone and let her emotions out instead of using the vigilante persona as a coping mechanism. It's a great moment and a very emotional moment from Ophelia because she actually cares so much about Jules. But Jules gets cruel AF and actually uses what Ophelia said about her parents, calling her a mistake, against her. In episode 9, they make up, but mostly because Harris found out about Jules and Ophelia being the vigilantes, and Ophelia cares more about her friendship with Harris than this petty fight that she's been having with Jules. Harris had not taken it well, and it goes against all he stands for. While we're at it, let's talk about Harris and Ophelia.
Our reputation would suffer.
Oh, yes. Your esteemed reputation as Harris James, important law student with much better things to do. And a cat allergy.
So Harris and Ophelia have been best friends for at least 3 years, since in episode 7 they celebrate their friendship anniversary, which they call Opheris Day. Harris runs the record store that is underneath Ophelia's apartment, and Ophelia and Harris both work at the record store. Ophelia also sells weed out of it, and Harris doesn't really like that, but he lets it slide for the most part. In episode 3, Ophelia leaves Harris to take care of the 2 girls on shrooms. He gets really upset about that, considering he was supposed to be writing his law journal essay, and so he fires her at the end of the episode. Later on, they have a reconciliation where she brings in a new, pretty funny resume.
Job experiences. Marijuana entrepreneur.
A little unrealistic for a person to do in real life. It's very funny. Their friendship is honestly super platonic and very clearly so. There are no hints to any romantic feelings, and it's honestly really refreshing in a teen show. At the end of episode 8, Harris confronts Ophelia about the wall, and in episode 9, they hash it out. This is because Harris witnessed the girls fighting after Jules beat Brady to a pulp. He also, in that moment, discovered what happened to Jules.
Does that mean that Jules was...
Harris is completely against the notion of violence as an answer. He is very angry and upset with Ophelia about this vigilante stuff. Also, because now he's in a position where he'll have to keep this a secret. It's not until Ophelia hears him on the radio denying the fact that he knows anything about the vigilante that she knows that he'll actually keep it a secret. But she feels extremely guilty for putting him in this position. This is when she decides to turn herself in. Harris and Jules save O from ruining her life, and they make up.
You're a pain in my ass. You're my ride or die.
He calls her his ride or die, and he reassures her that no matter what she does, he's always going to be there for her. He actually sees them both beating up the entire frat in episode 10, and then for some reason gets on board with the vigilante plan. I guess he thought they were awesome. Now let's talk about 2 people that are really not awesome.
Hey, how was it?
It was kind of great, actually.
Yeah?
Yeah.
So we know that Nate is a complete dickwad, and so obviously their relationship is not the healthiest. In episode 3, they have a fight because he expects her to give up an awesome opportunity so that she could be his trophy girlfriend at a sporting event.
You're my girlfriend and I want you there. What do you think it looks like if I show up without you?
Oh. Okay.
Throughout the show, while Kennedy and Nate are still together, Jules is trying her best to be a good friend to Kennedy, while all the while knowing that Nate is more than an ass. She then needs to be continuously put in uncomfortable situations and positions of mediation between her best friend and her R-word. She also then has to watch Nate profess his love to Kennedy
You're amazing.
while insinuating that Jules was just a hole to stick his dick in. Also hear Kennedy list all the reasons why Nate is amazing.
I love you because you're sweet and you're funny. You make me laugh.
In episode 6, as I told you before, Nate tells Kennedy that he cheated on her with Jules, which was a lie, and Kennedy believes him. In episode 8, Nate continues the lie and continuously tries to get her back by sending her flowers and things like that. When Kennedy brings up the idea that he R-worded Jules, his first reaction is to make Jules out to be a liar, to insinuate that Jules is the crazy one, and that you probably don't know Jules that well considering how much she's been lying to you. Later on, with Miles' advice, he tries to love actually her and asks her to go to a party with him. And for fucking some reason, Kennedy agrees to go with him. After all of the things that might be happening with Jules. Why are there so many of these scenes between them when I'm just like, I don't care about this relationship. I want to get back to the real story. These guys are just so frustrating. Like Kennedy, stop entertaining his flowers and I want to get you back notions. Like he's a bad guy. And you know it. Anyway, after finally talking it out with Jules and believing her, Kennedy confronts Nate about what she knows and lets him know that Jules reported him. He becomes borderline physically abusive and threatens her. I feel bad for Kennedy because it honestly is such a sudden, drastic change for her, but it's healthy for her to get out of it. She closes the door on him with confidence. How did Kennedy and Jules make up?
Kennedy, would you like to help me throw a pop-up art show tomorrow?
God, I would be honored.
My one main note on their friendship is that they need to talk. I know how hard it is for Jules to reach out to Kennedy considering the whole situation, but it needed to be done for both parties. So how did they get there? Well, like I've been saying, Kennedy has not been great this whole time. In episode 5, Kennedy pressures Jules to talk about sex.
Have you guys done it yet?
No. No, not yet.
Girl, Tonight is your night. He's gonna be all mushy and grateful, and if he doesn't go down on you for a full hour, he gots to go.
I suppose under normal circumstances, that would be more like a buddy nudging someone. Haha, let's talk about sex, baby. But Jules is clearly uncomfortable in this scene, so it's like, stop pushing, right? And as we know in episode 6, Kennedy does not believe Jules when she comes to her to tell her about Nate. It's quite maddening, and she's the worst friend. After Ophelia and Jules have their fight in front of bloody Brady, Jules runs away. She disappears. We don't know where she is. Ophelia goes to confront Kennedy because she knows that Kennedy is the one that Jules needs to talk to right now. This is why in episode 8, Kennedy goes to find Jules and they finally talk it out. She also admits to herself the truth of the matter. It's a sweet moment that should have happened way earlier. In episode 10, ironically, Kennedy starts keeping her emotions from Jules, which is quite hypocritical considering she had been annoyed with Jules for doing that to her. Jules comes to comfort Kennedy and actually, notices her distress and, continuously asks what's going on and tries to support her. Whereas Kennedy noticed something was going on with Jules and, just let it lie.
Have fun with the girls.
Okay. I'll see you later. Love you.
I enjoy the making up scenes, but I definitely still believe that Jules is a better friend than Kennedy ever was. There are 2 other relationships in this show that I haven't at all mentioned, so let's get into them.
Oh. Hey, Ophelia.
Hey.
Evan.
Oh, I know. What are you doing here?
Originally, these two start out as a one-night stand in the very beginning of the show. In episode 5, Ophelia meets him in the hallway when she's looking for information about the rideshare guys. Then she randomly decides to make out with him, and then they end up in his room, and they do the do. They have a great time playing video games, and then she dips out again. But she leaves her hat. This gives him an opportunity to seek her out again to return her hat. He returns the hat and says to her that he thinks she likes him, but she's scared to admit it to herself. After she almost gets essayed by the 2 guys, Evan comes over with pizza, and Ophelia asks him to stay so that she's not alone and so that she feels protected. She trusts him and actually asks him to stay the night, and in the middle of the night she starts crying, and Evan comforts her. When Evan is leaving the next morning, Ophelia actually steals his hat and chucks it somewhere in the room so that she has an excuse to see him again. Surprisingly though, on episode 7, on Oferis Day, she continuously ignores Evan's texts. Even when she's ignoring him though, and replying to his texts like, "No, I'm busy today," she's smiling. Then she sees Evan at a bar with another girl and she gets jealous. Then she becomes totally unreasonable with him by walking up to him and saying that she wants him to want her, but that she doesn't want to have to feel like she has to hang out with him. Okay. He's not having any of that, but for some reason he does show up at Ophelia's later in the episode, and they make up. I'm not mad. They like each other so much, and I love how chill they are and how quirky Ophelia gets. In episode 8, he wakes up in their bed, and they're happy. Ophelia is telling Harris about how all they do is hang out, have sex, and play video games, and that she's really happy about it. Then she invites Evan to the frat party where, the Brady takedown is gonna happen, but Evan says that he has to go take some people to see some turtles. But then he gets another RA to take over, and so he's able to go to the party. But since Ophelia and Jules set up this takedown, she now has to juggle, being a girlfriend and also being a vigilante. It doesn't work so well, and she's been disappearing all night, and then after her fight with Jules in the middle of the night, she probably goes home or whatever, and because of that, Evan, hadn't seen her for the rest of the night. They make up later, though, when Ophelia comes down the stairs in the record store wearing a shirt that says, "I'm a butthole," and Evan's just like, "Haha, you're funny," we're good. In episode 9, Evan comforts her about her fight with Harris, and then later on they talk about Ophelia's survivor's guilt, and about how Ophelia is predisposed to this darkness, but that Jules doesn't deserve any of this. In episode 10, Evan ditches for some mysterious reason, but then we find out later it's that the girl he had been talking to in the bar that one episode had reported her SA, or tried to report her SA, but the school was like, "We don't want you to report because of the vigilante." And then he points out that the vigilante is only necessary because the school is not doing anything. So we know that, Evan is on the right side of history. He knows the importance of the vigilante. At the end of the episode, the girls send him a vigilante letter to presumably get him in on the vigilante stuff, but unfortunately the episode ends without going any further with that. Probably because they were expecting to continue the storyline in the next season. Anyway, out of all the couples, this is the one that I'm rooting for the most. They're the most wholesome and healthy in my opinion. Although Fiona and Harris are a close second.
I'm very attracted to you right now.
I've always been attracted to you.
When Harris is babysitting Fiona and Gabby when they were on shrooms, he's also writing his law journal essay. Fiona comes up to Harris after the shrooms subside a bit and helps him with this law journal essay, and we find out that her mom is actually a judge. They bond over law, and then in episode 3 we see them going on a date to celebrate the fact that he got into the law journal. Ophelia is shocked, but supportive. In episode 5, we find out that Fiona likes him so much that she stops going to extra credit classes. In episode 8, Harris says that Fiona broadens his mind. And Fiona makes this awful but hilarious joke.
Not allergic to all cats.
They're a small part of the show, but they're cute. Alrighty, let's wrap things up. In the climax of the show, the girls send the sorority on a mission to intimidate Nate while they deal with more important Tyler is in jail problems. The sorority starts isolating Nate from his brothers by threatening to reveal their secrets. He appears to get kicked out of Omega Theta, but it turns out it was a lie to trap the vigilante. And yet they still beat them all up. It's a little unrealistic, but very badass. This is when Harris sees them and is suddenly on board. Then they have the big reveal of the video footage that Miles filmed of Nate's confession, and this moment is very reminiscent of scenes from Get Even and Control Z on Netflix. The coach ushers Nate out of the auditorium and says something like, "I'm sorry if you were offended." That's just a horrible thing to say. We then see Harris joining the law journal to be the man on the inside, and we see Evan getting his letter from the vigilantes. We see Tyler in the garage, and the camera pans towards Jules' ripped backpack. We see Nate and Brady decide to team up against their common enemy. Ophelia and Jules put up their sweet, vicious request for him, and then everything is up in the air. These are the season finale cliffhangers, never to be resolved. There you have it, folks. Another good show bites the dust. I'm glad to be back, and as always, let me know if there's any show that you want me to watch, because I need them. Follow me on my socials, and don't forget to give this video a like and a physical thumbs up, and I'll see you later. And if you want to see me, subscribe. But at the farty, but it needed to be